Good deal. Welcome, everybody. With the intensity and frequency of 50 to 100-year storms and the events increasing, how are cities planning for resilient and sustainable stormwater infrastructure? In 2020 alone, there were 22 catastrophic weather events across the U.S. where $1 billion in damage was suffered. If you were here last night and you listened to Councilmember Robinson talk, here in the Houston area, 7 events in the last 6 years. So the frequency of that is increasing. And so this session is going to explore innovative ways that the stakeholders on the stage here address the challenges of stormwater management, making sure that systems are both resilient, sustainable, and making sure that policy suggestions facilitate flood-resistant communities. So we're going to explore how open materials, performance-based characteristics, codes, standards, hard infrastructure, nature-based infrastructure, lots of fun things with stormwater management work to make sure that we've got resilient communities and communities that can resist stormwater situations. We will be talking about the interplay between federal, state, and city, making sure that the regulations, codes, and standards are truly successful. Because to be successful, and I think what you're going to hear from the folks on the stage, is that for us to truly be successful, we have to work together. City level, state level, municipal level, everybody needs to work together. Otherwise, we'll solve a problem in one place, and that will just push the problem downstream. So with that, I have a panel of experts today, and we're going to explore and discuss that. My name is Brian King. I am the VP of Product Management, Marketing, and Sustainability at ADS. If you don't know who ADS is, we make corrugated plastic pipe. We're the largest corrugated plastic pipe manufacturer in the US. That's probably all I'll say about product. If you want to talk about plastic pipe, I will be outside and I will gladly talk to you about plastic pipe. But in the meantime, I would like to introduce Brock Krennick. He is the Director of Resilient and Disaster Recovery for Harris County. Carol Ellinger-Haddock, who is the Director of Houston Public Works. And Larry Goldberg, Director of Infrastructure at CivTech, which is a Wolberg company. So we're going to start this, we're going to break the ice. I'm going to ask you guys, because there's lots of definitions around resiliency. So I'd like to hear from each one of you. What's your definition of resiliency? And since you asked Larry, you can go first.
Well, thank you, Brian. Again, my name is Larry Goldberg. I've been in the industry for about 39 years. I've had a unique opportunity to work with both public, private, different developments, private residential developments. Worked with TxDOT and worked with, like I said, the private land development as well. So I've had an opportunity to work in a lot of different areas and different stormwater types of projects. So resilience to me is the ability, capacity to recover. I'm just going to tell a little story. A lot of y'all know. End of last year, my bicycle and I didn't get along real well, and I had a little accident, broke my collarbone and two ribs. That taught me what resilience is. Resilience is the ability to recover quickly. It's the ability to get back on your feet and spring back. It's having family and friends come and help you along the way. And in this industry, it's already been mentioned several times already, that we have to all work together in agencies. And in order, if we're going to make this resilient and sustainability work, we all have to work together, especially in the city of Houston, TxDOT, Harris County, and all the surrounding communities, as Jeff pointed out, with the floodplain plan going on. So as we've also seen and people have also talked about, we have either large volumes of water, we have frozen water, and we have no water. So there's a common theme going on with the resilience in this area here with water. So anyway.
Thank you very much. Brock, your definition of resiliency.
First off, I don't like microphones. Can everybody hear me? Because if I talk in this, everybody's going to be deaf, and resiliency is not even going to be a thing anymore. Yeah, you don't even need that. I'm going to put this down. I don't like the microphones over. Now, I looked up resilience or resiliency, and they basically in the dictionary said resilience is really not a word. It's just a variant of resilience. And resilience has two different definitions tied to material. Non-living things is where the ability to spring back or rebound back to its original shape. But with persons or animals, it's the ability to adjust and accommodate to hardships and be able to move forward. And, you know, and like if you fall off a bike like Larry did and break collarbone, some ribs, then, you know, you got to work through those hardships. I believe that resiliency, we have to look at both definitions, especially with the aging infrastructure and everything that we have to develop, you know, resiliency into our infrastructure, you know, such that we look at the materials that we're currently using and new materials that we could be using, and what is the best fit that will last the longest time and be able to bounce back against all the conditions that we have throughout throughout our climate, but also how does it affect, you know, our ecosystems, and how does it affect our communities, and developing to minimize and reduce the hardships that those have to go against, you know, as we come in and change the landscape moving forward. So that's kind of where I took a little more technical side of it, but, you know, that's where I look at it.
It's funny you don't like the mic. I do.
Dude,
I do
seriously,
like the mic.
if I talk into that mic, everybody in the splash zone here will be complete.
The splash zone. And finally, Carol, you have the unenviable position of going last. What is your
You know,
definition?
I don't know, last is good because you get to fill in the gaps. And that's the beauty of it, is that when we look at resilience, it is an individual thing. When Resilient Houston was rolled out by the city of Houston, the purpose of it was to build capabilities in individuals, neighborhoods, communities in the entire region to address, withstand, and quickly recover from physical, social, and economic shocks and stresses. Today we're talking about infrastructure, we're focusing on infrastructure, but we can't do that in the absence of the people that live here. And so one of the big things that when we look at resilience, we have to be doing it in the mindset of where the people are, where not physically where they are, sometimes it's physically where they are, but not everybody, not every community, not every neighborhood in this city or in this region is at the same place or ability to withstand what comes at us, whether it is a storm, whether it's a winter storm, a windstorm, a hurricane storm, an economic storm, a health storm, whatever it is that comes at us. And so when we look at resilience, what I challenge engineers every day is to not focus so much on the infrastructure that we lose sight of the people that it's serving. And that we really, really, really look at resilience as the people that are living here. If we don't have the people here, there's not really any point in having this infrastructure. If we don't have this robust region that we're trying to support, then, you know, the infrastructure is here to support that. And sometimes the choice to not have infrastructure is here to support that. And so when you ask me about resilience, it's really about looking at all those things. I want to get past the responding and the reacting and the recovery, and getting to a point that our resilience is targeting at avoiding and mitigating before the next one comes. Whether it's infrastructure, or whether it's not infrastructure, or it's green infrastructure, or social infrastructure. Let's look at all of those and look at a holistic resilience picture. Infrastructure is a big part of it, but it's not the only part.
Thank you very much. That was a fantastic answer. Okay, so we're going to dive into some content now. The first question I'm going to ask is for Brock. So when you're developing an RRD, or Resilient Recovery of Disaster Plan, you have to look at many different types of storm events. I mean, I think people think when they see flooding, they think it's the same result every time, but you know that there's hurricanes, flash flooding, there's localized flooding events. Can you talk about how you think about the different types of events when you're planning for stormwater infrastructure within Harris County?
Yeah, absolutely. And for what I'm going to be discussing about is in the RRD program is subdivision drainage improvements, the 91 subdivisions that I've been responsible to try to fix. And a lot of things that I've discovered within taking over this program last year and going through is the majority of the subdivisions that we're dealing with that are have flood issues, regardless of the size of the storm, are subdivisions that were built in the 60s and 70s, even earlier than that, where they were literally designed to be in a bowl and detain all their own water and use the streets as the flood control. And that has become a problem, especially when we're trying to develop, resilient designs to try to get the water out of the bowls into a regional channel or a federal channel that is not even close. And so as development has changed and development has grown, the storms have grown as well in size, as we can see with Harvey and Tax Day and Imelda, and I can go on. But we had to start thinking about how to change things. And like one example of a critical change from these subdivisions here was when in the 80s, the thought of overflow paths and actually putting that in place so that if a rain event did happen, you had an overflow path to get the water out if it was a higher than what the subdivision was designed to. And so, yeah, we absolutely are looking at all the different types of storms, but in a picture of how we coordinate with, when I call Carol and say, hey, I'm going to be touching your system and talking with flood control and how we're going to get it to their channel and when are they going to be expanding their channels. Because a lot of these subdivision projects that I'm working on, we're having to put in and get partial relief with restrictors because my project, I get it done in 9 months. Well, where the water's going is going to take 3 years to do because it's 10 miles long and they got to get it down to the coast. So we got to work together with the cities, the county, flood control, the municipalities, the organizations on how we're going to fix these problems, set the expectation of what kind of fix you're getting up front versus what you're getting long term, and making sure that it still satisfies when we have these storms that come in and cause havoc. So.
Thank you very much. Carol, you mentioned in your definition of resiliency about people. And so when you balance between, and slightly different, obviously, conditions than Brock's dealing with when you're talking about Houston as a city, but can you talk about how you balance the needs for improving existing infrastructure and then creating new infrastructure?
Boy, that we could spend all 27 and a half minutes talking about it. But, that is the struggle that we fight, our elected officials fight. I can tell you that my council member who's sitting down here with me will tell you that there is not enough funding for the needs that we've identified in this region. And so where does the funding go? And I will say that we continue to learn, that we sometimes get it right, sometimes we could do it better, and sometimes we're finding areas that we overlooked or didn't realize because we didn't have good data to do that. And so it's about the people, but it's about having the right data to be able to get the information, to understand where all the problems are, to understand what the problems, what's causing the problems. And then the next step is to actually go hand in hand and listen to the community and have a good conversation with the community. Sometimes, and we're learning this one every single day. And I've got a team sitting over here on the side that's listening to this. And they're the ones that are interfacing with the public every single day, talking with the public every single day. Most importantly, learning to listen to the public every single day. What's important in your neighborhood? What's important in your neighborhood may not be the same as what's important in the next neighborhood. And so we're trying to balance where to go in first, and then once you know where to go in, what is the right solution for that neighborhood? And we've had to relearn. We used to go in with the solution and then do what we call engagement, which was telling you what we're doing. And then we were surprised when people pushed back and were upset with us. And so it really is a partnership with the community to understand what the problems are, what they need, what their priorities are. Some neighborhoods we go into and the priorities are not that I need a new street surface, it's that I need sidewalks to get to the bus stop and the school. Or lighting, because it's dark at night and I've got a safety concern. And so understanding what those are so that we actually address those first. But I will say, I am hopeful for the future with the funding streams that we're seeing coming from the state, that we're seeing come from the federal government, that we're going to be able to get into more communities more quickly than we have been able to. But I will also tell you that for the city of Houston, we are going to have a significant push and a significant focus on going into communities that have been underinvested and under-resourced, not just from the infrastructure side, but from city services for decades. And so you're going to see a lot of work in these areas that have roadside ditches, in these areas that don't have sidewalks, that don't have street lights. It will help us get there. It's not going to solve all our problems, and it's not going to do it overnight. I wish I could do a project in 3 years. I was just like, wow, that's exciting. Most of our projects, by the time you get the design done, you get the engagement part of it, you get the approvals, and the federal money comes with more oversight and more approvals. It's a federal investment, and they need to have those checks and balances. But it really does make it more transparent, but it also makes it a little bit longer to get to where we need to go.
And it's exciting to hear that it's the underserved communities that we're starting to focus on, because that's what you see, right? When you see the pictures of communities which are underwater in a storm event, it's not the nice houses, right? Or generally tends not to be the nice houses.
Harvey was different. Harvey was a game changer in that regard,
Yeah.
but if you look at almost all the other flooding events, it was in those underserved communities.
Right. And so, Larry, the question for you is, given your role between both public and private projects, can you comment on the balance between hard infrastructure systems and then when nature is involved in planning those resilient systems? Because one of the things we can do, obviously, is if we're investing in those communities, you could develop a stormwater solution that provides amenities when it's not raining. You can provide amenities as opposed to big concrete retention ponds. You can provide a place for kids to play and parks and streams and good things like that.
Yeah, I feel like sitting up here, I should be sitting between these two, because as a consultant, sometimes you kind of get both sides. Depends on the project, both from even my private clients and then what the public agencies require you to do.
Yes, we're reviewing. You need our signature.
Yes, I do. And that sometimes becomes a challenge, because you get, developers and things like that want to do very green, and I'm a very big advocate of doing green projects or whatever. But sometimes the funding's not there, the land is not there, there's a lot of constraints that are put on some of the projects, and so, having to work between both the public and private side becomes a challenge. And yes, nobody wants a big empty dry hole. We've learned that. We've been, like I said, I've been around long enough when we started detention pond facilities and some of these stormwater management stuff. They were big, dry, empty holes, and just sitting out there that never got maintained, that became issues. There was safety, this or that. So I've been very pleased to see that the agencies are finally starting to get on board, and we're starting to be able to work together more and create more amenity type of projects that the communities are really getting engaged in. And like Carol said, sometimes agencies will kind of direct the consultant, we want it this way, but then when you get out there in these public engagement meetings, you get a whole different perspective from the communities, and that's been really a good avenue to be able to get involved with that early on in the projects and get the community's input on that, so that, as a design consultant, we can design something that we can be proud of, the agencies can be proud of, and the community takes a hold of and buys into. So it's a challenge sometimes between the nature side of things and then just, hey, we don't have enough room, we're going to have to put big concrete pipes under the ground, and then you get caught between the cost of those projects and the life cycle cost. So it's quite a challenge, but I think we're all moving in the right direction and learning to work together. We should probably have flood control sitting on the other side of me over here, because sometimes when the water comes off of my project into a county or a city facility that has to get to the bayou, and so we've got to make all that work together, and it becomes a challenge at times.
Thank you very much. Now, to Carol, building on what Larry talked about, when you're planning that green infrastructure, can you go a little deeper about how you engage with the communities to look at quality of life, what needs you actually consider, and what you're doing with the housing authority to develop those solutions to add amenities to those communities?
So one of the things that Mayor Turner did when he came in was he created an Office of Complete Communities and partnered with our planning department, did a wonderful job of going out into the communities with a deliberate intention of bringing resources to those communities, but asking the question, what do you need? And it wasn't around public works infrastructure, it was around everything. What do you need around services? What do you need around grocery stores? It could be private services, healthcare, everything. Everything that should be available to you in a city, should be readily available to you in a city. I do have to divert for a second. It is alarming that two zip codes less than 3 miles apart in the city of Houston could have a 20-year difference in life expectancy. 20 years. Both near downtown. So the Complete Communities program was to get into that. And infrastructure is a big part of that. So how do we, the question is, how do we engage with the community? What I have found is that engineers were not taught how to engage with the community in school.
Well, come on, the reason we became engineers is because we didn't want to take English, foreign language, history.
And so we have been hesitant, and I will tell you, in some organizations, and I will tell you when I started in the city of Houston, there were concrete, cinder block, reinforced walls between the departments. And we've had to break those down inside so that we can come to the communities together as partners, so that we can work with the housing department on purchasing dilapidated flooding apartments in areas that are oversaturated and converting them into communities and green space using mitigation and flood control funding that becomes a park and green space and flood mitigation and open space and green infrastructure and actually helps the community because it takes some of that oversaturation out of having as many of those multifamily in one spot. So the question is, how do you do that? Some of it is internal, and a lot of it is going with partnering with our whether it's our partner agencies or it's our partner departments to have those conversations around holistic solutions.
Brian, can I add on to that?
Of course you can.
All right. One thing, and I think once the majority of the engineering community and kind of understands, and this came to, I grew up, so a little background, but I grew up in the hotel restaurant business. I did not grow up in, an engineering family at all. My grandfather owned all the burger chefs in Houston, if anybody remembers burger chefs from the 50s and 60s. But the thing is engineering, the engineering profession industry is a customer service profession. Engineering is our tool to do what we do, but we don't think of it that way. That's why we said when we came to the communities and said, here's the solution, it's because we developed it first because we thought engineering was our profession.
We didn't ask what service the customer wanted.
Exactly. And I'm seeing that too with a lot of these subdivisions here. It's like I'm going in to fix your drainage problem, but every one of them in there is saying, can I have streetlights? And so we go back and said, hey, do we have a program or grant or something? We can get some streetlights. And they're like, but you're doing drainage. I said, yes, but that's not what they want. They want safety for their kids at night. So now we're giving them streetlights because we were able to find a funding source. So it's understanding that once we all realize that what we do is customer service, it's, how do you want your burger? It's not, here's your solution. It makes things a whole lot easier when you're dealing with them.
So is it well done with the side of lights?
It was. And dry meat because there's no more water.
I think there's many functions where you have to listen to your customer, right? I mean, I'm a marketing guy, so you have to listen to your customer, otherwise, exactly right. You deliver a product to them and they look at you and say, it's not what I asked for, right? So you have to ask the community, so that's really good. I was gonna also tie in an office space quote as well too, when we're talking about engineers, because I mean, when you can tie in an office space quote, why would you not want to? But I'm a people person, I talk to the engineers. You need a separate person to do that. No, you don't.
Okay, Bob.
Exactly. What do you do here? Okay, next question is for Larry. Larry, in Houston and Harris County, a lot of the development has been facilitated by the development of MUDs, which are municipal utility districts, and you talked to me and told me what a MUD was. So can you talk a little bit about how those organizations work and with the city and the county, and what do you focus on with flood control within the MUD?
Okay, thanks. How many people here are familiar with special political subdivisions, mud districts? People pretty much familiar? I see a lot of no hands. But mud districts in Texas have been very successful. It's a way for a developer to go outside a city limit and create a development, be able to have a taxing authority. You go through two avenues, through either TCEQ or through the legislative, and get the mud district created. There's a board that controls the mud districts. It's got members, an attorney, an operator, blah, 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 is associated with the mud district. Mud districts have been very successful here in the Houston region and surrounding counties, and are becoming more popular around the state. And I believe mud districts do a really good job, but one thing that they have to deal with being out in outside the city limits, especially like here in the Houston area, and I'm going to kind of focus on the residential commercial side of mud districts, is that we have to, being out in the county, you have to comply with county standards. But mud districts are also created to be someday annexed into the city. So we have to comply, and TCQ in the Houston and the surrounding communities have been given the charge of approving our plan. So we have to adhere to the city requirement. So sometimes it becomes a challenge between what the city wants, the county wants, and then what the developer actually wants. But as mud districts have grown and gained popularity over the years, they have done a really good job of listening to the customers and the communities and providing more of these sustainable, resilient types of communities with hike and bike trails and ponds that aren't just big dry holes in the grounds, that are more amenities for the communities. And a lot of these facilities are further upstream on all these channels that I have to then get to Brock's drainage system.
Yeah, hold your
or
water
control.
back.
What's that?
Hold your water.
Hold your water back. It's, so we've had to really get innovative on these ponds and making sure that we're not flooding somebody downstream and having an impact to people downstream. So mud districts have been very successful in this area and grow a lot of popularity, like I said before, around the state of Texas. But at the same time, we have to adhere to different criteria with the different agencies, and sometimes, as consultants, we come up with some really great ideas and go, well, that doesn't fit our criteria. So we've actually, over I think probably the last 10 or 15 years, have actually started to work better together. I think the agencies have actually got more open-minded about, hey, let's give this a try. Let's open it up. Let's see what we can do with this. And just like Brock had said, we didn't really have streetlights in there, but hey, can we put streetlights in? Yeah, that's a great thing for this development and community. So it's kind of my take on mud districts.
I would like to point out one huge difference, and I think it is important for us to recognize as we're looking at infrastructure, is these mud districts are typically building new and seeking customers. We're dealing with the customers that are already there in the place that they're already in with the infrastructure and the services that they already have. And so while they're both focusing on that same end goal of serving customers, it's not as easy to address things in a developed urban environment as it is to develop new and build something that attracts customers.
I have to agree 100% with Carol that, as the new developments, most mud districts really took off in the 70s and 80s, and we didn't have some of the criteria that we had back then for stormwater. We've learned and making sure that we're not impacting those communities downstream that don't have the facilities and that are
And
the older
sufficient right of way.
and
I mean,
sufficient
we've got
right-of-way.
streets that have 25, 30 feet of right of way in parts of town. We have, we're fighting with how do you fit the roadway for the car with the sidewalk, with the infrastructure for the pedestrians, the bicyclists. Oh, people like to have power at their homes. So I get it when you call and complain that there's a hole in the right of way, but at the same time, I've not met anybody who doesn't want power in their homes. So, we do have to balance these things.
Yep.
There's only, like Carol said, so much limited right-of-ways in these areas. So.
Definitely. I mean, that's the theme that I think you're hearing up here, is that we have to work together. We have to work and talk to each other. You can't just solve your problem and create a problem for someone else. Question for Brock. What checks and balances do you have in place that ensures resilient infrastructure systems are designed and installed? Obviously, I think there's the adage of you can have it on budget, you can have it on time, or you can have the performance characteristics you want, pick two. how do you make sure that the monies you're spending are truly building resilient infrastructure?
Well, yeah, that's a good question, and you're right. You're right. I tell all my consultants, and my clients, the precincts and the judge, and you can have it fast, you can have good quality, you can have it cheap. You get 2 out of 3. You don't get all 3. And communication, really, communication is probably the most critical thing, and pre-planning before you get into design and start going to, so that you can set the expectations. You have that stakeholder communication with communities, what their needs are, and actually put the scope and fee together to what you're trying to actually build. And some of the things, and like, Carol talked about green infrastructure. Part of my role since I've been with the county is working on green infrastructure standards for residential areas, residential standards for our Imagination Zones initiative, which is thinking outside the box on how we build subdivisions with more green spaces, less concrete, don't use storm sewer, use bioswales and stuff like that, on how we can get the water out the same way without putting in intrusive infrastructure. And if we have to, then, is it something that we can put in, rock beds and stuff under that it filters its way through versus putting in a pipe or a box or something. And then having non-residential standards as well. So for areas where you're looking at trying to build a community that has needs for a healthcare facility or a shopping center or a grocery store, where in the subdivision you build some commercial to it and maybe put apartments up on top or set it up so that you have standards across the board. And then looking at across of connectivity, transportation connectivity, dictates nowadays a lot more on how we're going to drain the project, how we're going to build the project, especially with limited right-of-way and everything. If it was an open ditch system and there's no sidewalks and they want safety and sidewalks and lighting, well, then we're going to have to put drainage underground. And so we're looking at ways of doing things differently. And we've worked and we've met with Carol and her team on, here are all the variances that we're going to need for these ideas. Can we get a buy-in that if we come in with one of these initiatives that, we don't, we can just slide right on through, and she's already knows what's going on. And so when her team sees it and says, oh, good God, what's this Harris County doing over here? They're putting in, 9-foot wide roads because we want to slow down speed because there's a lot of kids in the area. And so we're looking at those different types of ideas and those initiatives. And so, but everything on the checks and balances comes down to communication and really knowing what we have to do for the community and make it sustainable and make it resilient, and that ties everything, everything together.
I can add on to Brock. I mean, that's one thing I think as a consultant has really improved over the last probably 10 or 15 years, where the agencies are communicating more. And as a consultant, that if I design a street, that the standards are very similar to the city as it is in the county, because otherwise you're dealing with your clients if they go, well, why, I did a development over here with a certain street type, and now I can't do that over here with the city or the county. And so it's good to see that everything they're starting to communicate, and we're able to keep some standards across the board, so there's not so much confusion about how to and get things approved through the different agencies.
And while you never want to wish a disaster on your community, one of the positive things that came out of Hurricane Harvey was a working group between the county and the city and some of the smaller entities throughout the region that specifically stopped and said, we can't have identical standards. I mean, because just like we talked about, a lot of the development in the unincorporated area is different than the development inside the city of Houston, but we can have cooperative and not competing design standards. And when you're looking at the same situation, you should be getting the same answer. And so we did that, and I believe that it has in some ways even leveled the playing field for where development goes. That it doesn't make developing in the county more advantageous over developing in the city. We're still working out some hiccups. It's amazing how many different scenarios our developers can find that aren't covered exactly in the codes and standards the way they're written. But it's definitely a goal of ours. But it's not even just us. We do also have to have the state and the feds as well. And we as a region have had this is all the code requires mentality in almost everything that we do. And we're trying to say the code's the minimum, as opposed to the code is the prescriptive. And really get people to look at and challenge us. I mean, sometimes it's the county challenging us, but come on in, guys, challenge us. You got a reason to have a 9-foot road? I promise you, Veronica and her team would be happy to talk to you about it.
We got one over in Lockwood, by the way.
No, seriously, it's about how do we repurpose? How do we, in some cases, replace? We've got areas in town where we're actually taking out lanes. Heaven forbid.
Right. Yeah, and the same way with us. I mean, since things have changed, we are actually, and I'm working with, a team to look through the regulations that have been since 1998, the last time they were updated, it seems like. But, where we have variances or things that have been repetitive over and over again, we're always constantly getting it. Well, maybe it's time to change the regulation and look at it. And two, and a lot of people are, here looks at the Harris County infrastructure regs and they assume it's only for development. Because that's what most people refer to. And we're trying to now change it to combine it where the infrastructure regs are for CIP projects, the developments and everything, it's going to be across the board. And so we are looking to update and again, like I said, partner with our sister agencies to be able to have not exact, but complementary, regulations across the board.
And the consultant community is appreciated. We were able to have some input and we're all working together to come up with some of these solutions or designs that our developers, the clients are coming to go, I want to do this. But you can't do that because agencies, it's not in the regs or whatever. So I think we're getting more and more, as the word's been today, is innovation. And that's been a really good thing seeing going forward.
All right, we're getting close to the end of our time, so if anyone has a question, we probably have time for one question. If not, I'm going to keep going up here because I got lots of questions to ask. So
I have a question.
You have a question?
Yes.
A question from the floor.
I might put you all on the spot, but I'm working on a project, I'm working on a P3 project up in the
Oh, we don't do
Northeast.
those.
I know, but this is the thing, it's Envision, right? They're requiring Envision, they want it gold, they want it to be gold. So being a materials person, we're using concrete boxes on there, but we're gonna reuse them because they're still good. But I wonder, when they're asking me, how do we meet requirements for materials or stormwater, which is really hard to meet in Envision, believe it or not, because it requires mitigation and not doing it. That's how you meet it. And so how do you determine what makes a sustainable material? Is it recycled? Is it locally sourced? What do we look at and how do we fit that as materials producers? Is that tough?
Take this thing on the table.
I was going to say, this sounds like a topic for the next task force.
Well, let me give you a little bit of thought, thinking outside the box.
Okay.
No pun intended. It's not necessarily always just material.
Okay.
Okay, it's can you reduce truck trips? Can you reduce pollution? Can you reduce noise pollution during construction? So if you have boxes, say if you have boxes, they're still good, but you want to ramp them up, maybe you look at going and getting an approved vendor that does a liner on the inside of the boxes. So now you just added life to the existing infrastructure and minimally impacted the community and the area because you didn't have to bring in a bunch of trucks and drop down new material and tearing up the surface and everything like that. So, yeah, and when you're looking at Envision is all perspective. I mean, anybody that's taking the Envision test, it's subjective. Every answer is correct, but they just tell you that only C is correct. And
C is more correct.
more correct. Oh, trust me, you give 75 hours to take that stupid test, and I sat in the last 30 minutes trying to figure out the last 3 questions, and I had like 20 people in the room debating it. But no, you got to look at it and think outside the box, and how does it fix? And then it might be, you're by not putting new material and using the existing, you might be benefiting quality of life in this completely different section.
Right.
And so that's where you got to look at it, and how can you tie them all together to get your point total and go across. It's not always necessarily material to way to look at it.
I was going to say, but that does, your question does spark, do we reach into some of the industries and work with them on, many of our vendors already use recycled, reclaimed materials in things that they're doing. And so, some of that, some of that's out there already, but maybe this is where the county and the city need to be louder partners, and that's going to be a preference. That's going to,
And how can we meet it, right?
And we're out of time, so I'm going to give Larry like 3 words.
Three words. Well, I just want to add a little bit to, since we were talking about Envision and new products. I mean, one challenge, I guess, from the consulting side of things, when we do see new products and able to use those, a lot of the agencies don't approve those. So I think we need to have a better system or something. TxDOT can't approve everything. And I've been into the sales side of things also through my career, and I hear that a lot. It's like, well, TxDOT hasn't approved this from, no, I'm not talking about city or county, but other communities and smaller cities. So I think we just, as a whole, society or what have you, industry, need to find ways to bring new products to market sooner, because there are a lot of good products out there, but the agencies may not have approved them or accept them, and you can't use them. And then even on the Envision stuff, you're limited sometimes on what you can do on a project, even though there's something out there. But anyway, this kind of challenge for the industry to find ways that we can bring some of these products to market, because it's very expensive for a company. Take 10 years to get in a new product to the industry and get it accepted and approval. Sometimes they're gone by the wayside by then. But anyway, my 2 cents worth. More than 3 words.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think historically as an industry, we have been slow to change. And so when you think about innovation, right, how do we accelerate innovation? So with each of you, Brock, Carol, Larry, thank you very much for your time. Great conversation, and we're done. Thanks.